I thought I knew everything about love until Sarah walked out of my life without explanation. What I discovered 3 years later shattered every assumption I had about relationships, loyalty, and the lengths people will go to protect the ones they love. My name is Marcus, and this is the story that still keeps me awake at night. Sarah and I were that couple everyone envied. We met during junior year at Arizona State. She was studying nursing, I was in marketing. Our first date lasted 14 hours. We talked through dinner, walked around campus until midnight, then sat in her dorm lobby until the sun came up, discussing everything from childhood fears to dreams of changing the world. She had this laugh that started as a giggle and transformed into something contagious that made everyone around her smile. When she was passionate about something, usually her pediatric nursing studies, her entire face would light up, and she'd talk with her hands, painting pictures in the air of the children she'd someday help heal. We dated for 4 years through college and beyond. After graduation, she got a job at Phoenix Children's Hospital, working in the oncology ward. I landed a position at a digital marketing firm downtown. We moved in together into a cozy apartment in Tempe, adopting a rescue cat named Benny who became our practice child. Sarah would come home exhausted from 12-hour shifts, still in her scrubs, and tell me stories about her young patients. She never used their real names, but I knew each kid by the nicknames she gave them. Superhero Sam, who wore his cape during chemo. Princess Maya, who insisted on wearing a tiara for every treatment. Little Einstein, who asked more questions than most adults could answer. "These kids are braver than I'll ever be," she'd say, curled up against me on our second-hand couch. "They face impossible odds every single day and still find reasons to smile. They make me want to be better." I was planning to propose on her 26th birthday. I had the ring, a vintage sapphire that matched her eyes, purchased with money I'd saved for 8 months. I'd even spoken to her father, who gave his blessing with tears in his eyes. "She's found someone who loves her the way she deserves," he told me over dinner at their house in Scottsdale. We had everything mapped out with the precision of architects designing our dream life. Engagement in April, wedding the following spring in her childhood church. She wanted 3 kids, enough for a family basketball team, she'd joke. We'd already picked out names, Isabella, Christopher, and if we were blessed with a third, we'd let that child choose their own name when they were old enough. She'd sketch our future house on napkins during dinner dates, always including a reading nook by the window. For when we have little ones, a big kitchen, because I want to teach them to cook, and a garden where we could grow vegetables together. I kept those napkins in my wallet, pulling them out whenever I needed a reminder of what we were building toward. But there were signs I missed, subtle changes that I attributed to work stress or the natural evolution of a long relationship. She started working extra shifts, claiming the hospital was understaffed. She'd come home later and later, sometimes not until 10 or 11 at night. When I suggested she was overworking herself, she'd brush off my concerns. "These kids need me," she'd say. "I can't just clock out when someone's fighting for their life." She became more protective of her phone, taking calls in the other room. When I asked who had called, she'd give vague answers. Work stuff, or just my mom checking in. Her usual openness about her day became guarded responses. Instead of detailed stories about her patients, she'd simply say it was a tough day and change the subject. She stopped talking about our future house. The napkin sketches disappeared. When I'd bring up wedding planning or mention looking at engagement rings in shop windows, she'd get a strange look in her eyes, not excitement, but something closer to panic. The last month we lived together, she'd wake up in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling. When I'd ask what was wrong, she'd say she was thinking about work, about a patient she couldn't save. I'd hold her until she fell back asleep, but I could feel the tension in her body, like she was carrying a weight too heavy for her shoulders. Then came October 15, 2019. I remember the date because it was supposed to be our 4-year anniversary dinner. I had reservations at the restaurant where we'd had our first official date, and the engagement ring was hidden in my jacket pocket. I came home early from work, planning to surprise her with flowers before we went out. Instead, I found half our apartment emptied. Her clothes were gone from our closet. Her nursing textbooks, her coffee mug collection, the throw pillows she'd insisted would make this place feel like home, all vanished. On our kitchen counter, next to the wilted flowers I'd brought her the week before, was a single sheet of notebook paper with 3 sentences written in her careful handwriting. "Marcus, I can't do this anymore. Please don't try to find me. You deserve better than what I can give you. I'm sorry." That was it. 4 years reduced to 3 sentences, our entire future erased with 43 words. I called her phone immediately. The number was disconnected. I drove to the hospital, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. Her supervisor in the oncology ward looked genuinely shocked when I asked for Sarah. She turned in her resignation yesterday, the woman told me, her face creased with concern. No 2 weeks notice, no explanation. She just said she had to leave immediately for personal reasons. Marcus, we've never seen her like that. She was crying when she cleaned out her locker. This was the woman who'd worked through the flu rather than leave her patients short-staffed. Sarah didn't abandon responsibilities, she collected them like stray animals, always trying to save everyone around her. Her social media accounts were deleted completely. Facebook, Instagram, even her LinkedIn profile all gone like she'd never existed. I drove to her parents' house in Scottsdale, but her mother answered the door with red-rimmed eyes and claimed they hadn't heard from her. "She's an adult, Marcus," Mrs. Martinez said, but her voice cracked. "If she wants space, we have to respect that." Her father wouldn't even come to the door. Through the window, I could see him sitting in his recliner, staring at the wall with the same hollow expression I probably wore. Her sister Lisa hung up on me 3 times before finally answering and screaming, "She doesn't want to talk to you. Stop calling us. Just leave her alone." But I heard Lisa crying before she hung up, and the desperation in her voice told me she was lying about something. Everyone in Sarah's life suddenly developed amnesia about her whereabouts, but they all wore the same expression of barely controlled grief. Whatever had happened, they all knew something I didn't. For 3 years, I lived with this gaping wound. I tried dating other women, but every relationship crumbled under the weight of my unresolved questions. Jessica, a marketing executive, broke up with me after 6 months because I still kept Sarah's picture in my wallet. "You're not available," she told me. Not emotionally, anyway. She was right. I was haunted by the ghost of a relationship that had ended without explanation. I'd catch myself looking for Sarah in crowds, checking her old social media haunts for any sign she still existed. I drove past her parents' house more times than I cared to admit, hoping to see her car in the driveway. Therapists told me to accept the closure I'll never get, and focus on creating new patterns. Friends suggested she was probably cheating or had commitment issues. My brother even hired a private investigator who found nothing: no new address, no employment records, no credit card activity. Sarah Martinez had effectively disappeared from public record. But I knew Sarah in ways that mattered. She wasn't capable of casual cruelty. She cried when we had to put down her childhood dog. She'd stop to help injured animals on the highway. She once spent her entire paycheck buying Christmas presents for her pediatric patients' families who couldn't afford them. This was not a woman who would vanish from someone's life without a devastating reason. The breakthrough came at the most unexpected moment. I was grabbing coffee at our old spot near Phoenix Children's Hospital, a ritual I'd maintained despite the pain it caused me. I couldn't fully let go of the places where we'd been happy. I was waiting for my order when I overheard 2 nurses talking at the table behind me. "Did you hear about Sarah Martinez? So tragic about her mom?" My blood froze. Sarah's mother had been perfectly healthy when I knew the family. Mrs. Martinez had been planning to start a book club, talking about traveling with her husband after his retirement. I turned around, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Excuse me," I said to the nurses. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you say Sarah Martinez? I used to know her." The older nurse's face immediately softened with recognition. "Oh, you must be Marcus. Sarah used to talk about you all the time." "I'm so sorry, honey. You probably haven't heard about what happened." "What happened?" My voice came out as a whisper. Her mother was diagnosed with early-stage Huntington's disease about 4 years ago. Sarah's been her full-time caregiver ever since. She had to leave the hospital to take care of her mom. Such a sweet girl, sacrificing her whole life like that. We all miss working with her. The coffee shop seemed to tilt sideways. Huntington's disease, I'd heard of it but didn't know the details. The nurse continued talking, but her words sounded like they were coming from underwater. Sarah was so torn up about leaving nursing. But you know how she is, she couldn't let anyone else carry that burden. She's been doing private care work when she can, but mostly she's just devoted herself to making her mother comfortable. I stumbled out of that coffee shop and spent the next 6 hours in the Phoenix Public Library, researching everything I could find about Huntington's disease. What I learned made my stomach turn. Huntington's is a hereditary neurological disorder that causes progressive breakdown of nerve cells in the brain. Patients experience involuntary movements, cognitive decline, and emotional disturbances. Most die within 15-20 years of diagnosis. There's no cure. The hereditary aspect was what made my hands shake as I read. If a parent has Huntington's disease, each child has a 50% chance of inheriting the gene and developing the condition. Sarah hadn't left me because she stopped loving me. She'd left because she thought she might be carrying a genetic time bomb that would destroy both our futures. The pieces of our final month together suddenly clicked into place. The late nights weren't extra shifts at the hospital, they were trips to see her mother. The secretive phone calls were consultations with doctors. The panic in her eyes when I talked about marriage and children wasn't commitment phobia, it was terror that she might pass on a devastating disease to our kids. She'd been living with this knowledge for months, trying to figure out how to tell me or whether to tell me at all. In the end, she'd chosen to sacrifice our relationship rather than risk trapping me in a future she believed would destroy us both. I sat in that library until closing time, crying over medical journals that described the slow, cruel progression of a disease that steals everything from its victims. Their ability to walk, talk, think, and eventually, their lives. I found Sarah's address through a private investigator. She was living in a small apartment complex in Ahwatukee, about 20 minutes from her parents' house. I sat in my car outside her building for 2 hours, practicing what I would say, trying to prepare for whatever version of her I might find. The woman who answered the door wasn't the vibrant Sarah I remembered. She was thinner, with premature lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair that hadn't been there 3 years ago. She wore scrubs from a home healthcare company, and I could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. But when she saw me, her carefully constructed composure crumbled. Her face went through a dozen emotions in seconds: shock, joy, terror, and finally, overwhelming grief. "Marcus," she whispered. "You can't be here. We need to talk." She tried to close the door, but I gently held it open. "Please, Sarah, I know about your mom. I know about Huntington's disease." She broke down completely then, collapsing into sobs that seemed to come from her soul. I caught her as she fell forward, holding her as she cried 3 years of suppressed grief into my shoulder. Her body shook with the force of emotions she'd been holding back since the day she walked away. "I couldn't ask you to live through this," she whispered between sobs. Watching someone you love deteriorate piece by piece. I couldn't do that to you. That wasn't your choice to make. You don't understand, Marcus. I might have it too. There's a 50% chance I'm carrying the gene. I might have given it to our children. I was protecting you from a nightmare. I pulled back to look at her face, this woman I'd never stopped loving, who looked like she'd aged a decade in 3 years. Sarah, look at me. Do you really think I would have chosen to walk away? Do you think I would have loved you less knowing what we might face together? I thought it would be easier if you hated me. If you believed I was selfish instead of sick. I wanted you to move on, to find someone who could give you the life you deserve. She led me into her small apartment, and I saw immediately how different her life had become. Medical equipment in the corner, pill organizers on the kitchen counter, a baby monitor so she could hear her mother in the bedroom. The sketches of our dream house had been replaced by medical charts and caregiver schedules. Mom has good days and bad days, Sarah explained, wiping her eyes with a tissue. On good days, she remembers who I am and can hold conversations. On bad days, she doesn't recognize me and sometimes gets violent. I've been taking care of her for 3 years now. The cruelest part? Sarah had been getting genetic testing done the week she left me. The results came back 2 months after she'd moved out. She didn't carry the Huntington's gene. She'd destroyed our relationship to protect me from a future that would never happen. I got the test results in December 2019, she sobbed. Negative. I don't have the gene, Marcus. I threw away everything we had for nothing. I sat there on her second-hand couch, holding the woman I'd never stopped loving, processing the magnitude of her sacrifice and the tragedy of our lost years. She'd chosen to be the villain in our story rather than the victim, believing it would cause me less pain in the long run. Why didn't you tell me when you got the results? I asked. Because by then, the damage was done. You'd moved on at least, I hoped you had. And Mom still needed me. Dad couldn't handle it alone. I thought maybe it was better this way. You could remember me as the woman who broke your heart instead of the woman who chose her sick mother over your future. We talked until sunrise, and she showed me pictures from the past 3 years. Her mother's gradual decline, her father's transformation from a jovial man into someone hollowed out by grief and exhaustion, Sarah's own journey from pediatric nurse to full-time caregiver. She'd given up everything, her career, her friendships, her chance at happiness to care for a woman who sometimes didn't even remember her name. I followed your LinkedIn, she admitted as dawn broke through her small windows. I knew when you got promoted to senior marketing manager. I knew when you moved to that nice apartment in Scottsdale. I celebrated your victories from a distance and cried during your setbacks. I never stopped loving you, Marcus. I just loved you enough to let you go. But there was more to the story, details that made her decision even more heartbreaking. Her father had been struggling with depression since the diagnosis, often leaving Sarah to handle her mother's care alone for days at a time. Her sister Lisa lived in Denver and could only visit once a month. The financial strain had been enormous. Her mother's medical bills had wiped out her parents' retirement savings. Sarah had been working part-time as a private duty nurse when she could arrange care for her mother, but the income was sporadic. She'd sold her car and was using public transportation to get to work. The engagement ring I'd planned to give her could have covered her mother's medications for 6 months. I knew you'd want to help, she said. I knew you'd insist on taking on Mom's medical expenses, on quitting your job to help me care for her. But that would have meant sacrificing your future too, and I couldn't live with that guilt. The revelation changed everything and nothing simultaneously. I understood her motivations now, but I couldn't instantly forgive 3 years of deception and lost time. The woman sitting across from me was both the love of my life and a stranger who had made devastating choices without including me in the decision-making process. We decided to try couples therapy, not to immediately restart our relationship, but to process this trauma together with professional guidance. Dr. Rebecca Chen, our therapist, helped us understand that Sarah's actions came from a place of profound love and equally profound terror, while acknowledging that her methods had caused immeasurable harm to both of us. Sarah was trying to control an uncontrollable situation, Dr. Chen explained during one of our sessions. When faced with the possibility of devastating loss, she chose to create a loss she could manage the end of your relationship rather than face the uncertainty of what Huntington's might bring. It took 8 months of intensive therapy sessions twice a week before I could fully forgive her. Not just for leaving, but for not trusting me enough to stay and face whatever came together. Sarah had to learn to accept love without trying to protect people from her own struggles. I had to learn to recognize the signs when someone I care about is carrying burdens they're too afraid to share. The hardest part was rebuilding trust. How do you trust someone who disappeared from your life for 3 years, even if their motives were pure? How do you believe they won't make the same choice again when life gets difficult? We took it slowly. Coffee dates once a week, then dinners. I started helping with her mother's care, learning how to operate the medical equipment and understanding the daily routine Sarah had been managing alone. Mrs. Martinez, despite her condition, still had moments of clarity where she remembered me and would ask why I'd stayed away so long. "I missed you," she told me during one of her good days. "Sarah cried about you for months after you stopped coming around. I told her she should call you, but she said you were better off without us." Watching Sarah with her mother broke my heart in new ways. She had infinite patience for the repetitive questions, the occasional outbursts of confusion and anger, the physical challenges that came with the disease's progression. She'd brush her mother's hair every morning and read to her every evening, maintaining rituals that provided comfort even when recognition was absent. "Some days she doesn't know who I am," Sarah told me as we watched her mother sleep. "But I know who she is. She's the woman who taught me to be compassionate, who showed me that love means staying even when it's difficult. I couldn't abandon her the way I abandoned you." We remarried last spring in a small ceremony at her mother's assisted living facility. After 3 years of home care, Sarah had finally accepted that her mother needed professional medical attention that she couldn't provide. It was the hardest decision of her life, but Mrs. Martinez was safer and more comfortable with trained staff and specialized equipment. Mrs. Martinez, despite her condition, had a moment of perfect clarity during our wedding ceremony. She smiled at me and said, "Take care of my daughter. She's been taking care of everyone else for too long." Sarah's father walked her down the aisle, whispering, "I'm sorry we kept this from you," as he placed her hand in mine. He'd aged tremendously in the years I'd been away, but seeing his daughter happy again had brought some light back to his eyes. Our marriage is different now, deeper, but scarred. We've learned to communicate about fears instead of making unilateral decisions based on them. We have a rule: no major life decisions without discussing them together first, no matter how painful the conversation might be. Sarah still struggles with guilt over our lost years. She wonders what might have happened if she'd trusted me with the truth from the beginning. I struggle sometimes with trusting that she won't disappear again when life gets difficult. But we're building something stronger than what we had before, a love that's been tested by the worst kind of loss and survived. We're expecting our first child in December. Sarah cried when we saw the ultrasound, not from joy, but from regret that she'd almost denied us this future. "I could have been pregnant by now," she whispered. "We could have had 3 years to be a family." I told her we can't live in the past, but we can honor our lost years by never taking our found time for granted. The most profound lesson from this experience? Sometimes people hurt us because they love us too much, not too little. Sarah's shocking reason for leaving wasn't another man, addiction, or falling out of love. It was a misguided attempt to spare me from pain that ultimately caused us both more suffering than the truth ever could have. What would you do if you discovered that the person who broke your heart was actually trying to save you from something worse? Would you be able to forgive someone who loved you so much they were willing to become your villain? Because sometimes the most shocking reasons people leave aren't about selfishness, they're about the impossible weight of selfless love.